Thinking about buying a home in 2025? Before you sign anything, you need to know about the hidden dangers that could turn your dream home into a nightmare. From sneaky fees to risky market trends, these are the things that nobody's talking about. Stick with me to the end of this video and you'll learn how to dodge these traps and save thousands. Buying a home is one of life's biggest decisions, and I'm here to tell you in 2025, it's only getting more and more complex. Over the last 3 years, we've seen interest rates rise on up, then come down a little bit. Rise back up, come down a little bit. Ultimately, we still find ourselves in 2025 in a higher interest rate environment, and I don't see that changing too terribly much throughout the year. Add to it, we still have a housing shortage and a competitive marketplace with more buyers than there are sellers. Add to that other things that are going on in the marketplace that just make things more complex. It can throw off even the most experienced buyer. That's why today I'm gonna break down the 5 hidden dangers, and oh yeah, one bonus one that could cost you big time. Let's get started. Danger number 1 is the hidden costs beyond your down payment. I find that most home buyers focus mainly on their down payment and either ignore or simply are not aware of some of the other costs like closing costs, taxes, and maintenance that can all add up super quick. Here's one stat that you definitely need to know when it comes to closing costs. Now, closing costs will differ depending upon where you are in the country, what state, what county, things like that. Where I'm located in Montgomery County, Maryland, I prepare home buyers that they should expect that their closing costs are going to be about 3.5% of the sales price. So simply what that means is on a $500,000 purchase, add 3.5% to that, we're looking at probably an additional $17,000 to $20,000 in addition to what their down payment's going to be. Now, in other parts of the country, you could find it either more or less. Some areas, maybe you'll find it as low as maybe 2% of the sales price, while other areas it might be as much as 5%. Either way, whether it's 2% or 5% or somewhere in between, you need to know this right up front, because the one thing that I can tell you when it comes to real estate, no surprises are good. Another pro tip I would give you is to hire a professional home inspector so that you're going into this transaction eyes wide open to possible repairs that you're going to need maybe in the near future as well as those down the road. And if you do find costly repairs that come up during the home inspection, you do reserve the right to potentially either ask or negotiate for the seller to either repair these items or potentially negotiate a credit to be paid back to you at the time of closing. Danger number 2 is rising interest rates. And while nobody's really predicting any huge shifts in 2025, either any huge drops down or any huge spikes up, once again, you never know because so many things affect those interest rates. So, I always refer to my magic 8 ball to see what's going to happen. Are interest rates going to go up in 2025? And it says it is certain. Yikes. Okay, I'm going to get rid of that 8 ball. Anyways, once again, you're going to need to budget in the fact that interest rates could rise up a little bit. They could drop down a little bit, but be prepared. Once again, it's always best to figure worst case scenario that rates will go up some. And once again, they don't need to go up a lot to make a huge difference on your monthly payment. In fact, Freddie Mac states that a 1% rise in the 30-year mortgage interest rate affects affordability by 10%. So what you need to do is compare mortgage lenders to find the very best rate. A little bit of an interest rate difference can mean thousands over the life of the loan. Second tip is lock in your interest rate early with a reputable lender. By doing so, this enables you to kind of, once again, lock in on that rate in between the time that you write the contract and it's accepted and the time you go to closing. So if interest rates were to go up in, let's say, that 30 to 60 day period, you're covered and protected. Another tip that you might consider is going with something like a 5 or 7 year ARM. Now, I know what you're thinking. Everybody hears the word ARM and they start getting freaked out and they start thinking back to those predatory ARMs back in 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, those periods. We're not talking about those type of rates anymore. What we're talking about is a 5 or 7 year ARM where you're actually fixed for 5 years or maybe it's 7 years at an interest rate that is lower than the 30-year fixed. It might be a 0.5% lower, but it's fixed for 5 years or 7 years. And so that gives some time to either potentially refinance later down the road, or heck, I know that in the DC area, most people are moving within 7 years. So if you buy your home thinking that, hey, I'm only going to be here 5 or 6 years, then once again, a 5 to 7 year ARM might make more sense because you get into a lower rate and one that does not even adjust before you leave. Interest rates go up, go down. If there ever comes a time where it makes sense where you could refinance, you could always do that at a later date. Of course, this is assuming that you still have your job and there's equity in the property and things like that. You're going to want to check with your lender on that. While we're talking about affordability, if you're thinking about either buying or selling buying a home in 2025, I have a vast network of some of the top agents throughout the country who can help you. So if you do not have a relationship with a top realtor, and once again, I'm going to stress a top and professional realtor, and you'd like a referral, and this is no obligation or anything, then go ahead and either simply scan the QR code on the screen right now, or click the link in the description box below. And there it'll take you to a form where you can fill out, put your name in there, some information about you, where you live and all that. And I'd be happy to call you up. Won't stalk you. Don't worry about that. We'll chat for maybe a few minutes and I'll help make a good handoff to one of the top agents in your area. So if you'd like to do that, go ahead and either scan that QR code now or click the link in the description box at the end of this video. Danger number 3 is waiving contingencies in a competitive market. The risk is in hot markets like we have through many parts of this country here, it's not uncommon that buyers may waive home inspection contingencies, appraisal contingencies, and things like that. So we're going to talk a little bit about the danger of waiving some of these contingencies, as well as maybe a hack to get around one or two of them. Waiving a home inspection may mean that you miss some red flag items like black mold, a leaky roof, or maybe some faulty wiring. One of the things that I do and I help my clients with when they're actually in a competitive situation is sometimes what we do is we actually negotiate a pre-home inspection. This is actually a little bit of reverse engineering, reverse thinking, I guess you could call it, where we're actually doing the inspection before we write the contract. This way we get the inspection done. You're either deciding to go into this contract with eyes wide open, or guess what? Walking away and not even offering on the home with, once again, eyes wide open. So this is a way to potentially get the inspection yet avoid the contingency. That may be costly and may mean that the sellers go with a different buyer. Now, when it comes to appraisal contingencies, that is a difficult one to waive, but you're going to be getting a lot of pressure out there, especially in the hot markets when you're competing to waive appraisal contingencies. Now, you might want to also, once again, check with your mortgage lender, because depending upon how much down payment you're putting, the house, the purchase price, and things like that, many of my buyers are actually getting appraisal waivers from their mortgage lender, where the mortgage lender is not even requiring an appraisal. I find this especially happens more often when the buyers are putting down 20% or greater, obviously have great credit scores in the upper 700s to 800 plus. Don't see this as often with lower down payment loans where there's maybe 5% down payment or less. However, with all this being said, I would say the best case scenario, it's always best to have a home inspection contingency written into the contract and an appraisal contingency, as well as other things like maybe radon, potentially lead paint, depending upon the age and everything, maybe mold as well. Be cautious when out there, know your options, know your choices. If you're working with a good agent, he or she will be able to give you those options and choices and guide you through the process. Danger number 4 is overpaying in a bidding war. In many tight markets, it's very common to see multiple offers, buyers overbidding for houses. Oftentimes, this can put them in financial strain and also potentially negative equity if you're not careful. What I would suggest right there is, once again, sometimes there's just no avoiding having to potentially offer over the list price in a competitive situation. If this is the home you want, you've done your research, it's a great home, you love the school district, everything works for you, I would never say that paying over the list price is the wrong thing to do. However, you need to make sure that you still keep it within your financial budget. Like, don't get into this, the hype of everything and the thrill of the pursuit where, like, you know, all common sense goes out the window and you're just like throwing crazy money and you're not taking a look at, okay, what is this doing to me financially? How much more am I going to need up front, as well as how much more is this going to cost me monthly? So as long as you stay within those parameters, I would say that be prepared. Tight market, you might need to go higher than list price, but once again, just still keep it within your budget. The other tip I will give you, and this is really regardless of whether there's a competing offer or not, is you should always have your real estate agent put together a comparable market analysis on the property that you're interested in purchasing. And the comparable market analysis will show other comparable styled homes that are either on the market, currently under contract or pending, or have sold, okay? And when I'm looking at data, I usually suggest to keep the data within 6 months. You know, these would be properties that would be similar to the one you're purchasing, or looking to purchase, I should say, and see what is currently on the market that's comparable, what's currently pending, and what has recently sold, and then start comparing. Really, like, you know, most of these will have photographs these days, so you can kind of compare the size, the lot size, the square footage, also amenities. Does the property that you're looking at have the updated kitchen that was, $100,000 was invested into it 2 or 3 years ago, updated baths, and the comparable ones are the ones that look like Brady Bunch City that haven't had any renovations done? Or is it flipped? Are you looking at the Brady Bunch City and comparing that to the ones that have been completely refurbished and renovated? You're going to want to know this going in to kind of get a feel for where the value is. Last tip I'm going to give you before you enter into a contract, make sure you have a game plan in advance with a firm budget so you know exactly, like, you know what, I'm not going any more higher than this. If I have to go up this high to get it and I get it, awesome. And if we go up this high but somebody else goes up this high and they get it, you know what, God bless them, let them have it. So set that budget, create that game plan so that you don't just fall prey to the thrill of the hunt and, you know what, I just got to win at all costs. I've seen many buyers do that. Stand firm to your budget, stand firm to your game plan, and ultimately in the end, typically patience is going to pay off because, you know what, there are going to be other properties that come up for sale. Danger number 5 is the hidden cost of older homes. Now, listen, I love old homes. I love going through turn of the century homes. And when I talk about turn of the century, I'm not talking about turn of the century like the 21st century. I'm talking turn of the century, meaning the 20th century, going into older homes that were built in the 1800s, maybe early 1900s. A lot of charm there. However, Kevin is not a real fix-it guy. And so I already know right there that that's not going to be the home for me, even though I can appreciate it. I think you guys kind of need to think the same thing, that with older homes comes also a lot of outdated things like outdated electrical, outdated plumbing. You may find asbestos, riddled with lead paint, all sorts of things that you really need to take into consideration. So when we talk about old homes, what defines an old home? Well, you know what? That's going to be different for all of us. I would definitely say that, when you're looking at homes, that there's definitely some telltale signs you're going to see that come with age. For example, I don't consider a 20-year-old home an old home. However, if you are looking at a home that's in that 20-year age range, some of the things that typically go in that year 15 through 20 are going to be things like the roof, HVACs, water heaters, things like that, as well as maybe even windows. You're going to want to take a look at these properties when you're going through there, even before you write the offer, to determine, okay, what is the age of the roof? Is it a 20-year-old roof? Well, guess what? If it's a 20-year-old roof, I can pretty much tell you it's like the equivalent of a 90-year-old man walking around. Maybe the dude's got a few years left in him, but he certainly is on borrowed time, and I would definitely say the same thing with the roof. HVAC, exactly the same. Typically what we find is the HVAC systems, depending upon conditions, depending on how they're well kept, could last anywhere from maybe 12 to 20 years. Water heaters kind of in that same realm. And windows, once again, definitely gotten a lot better over the last few years. So these are costly things that you need to know about and costly things that you need to budget. The other thing that I would say is that you need to take into consideration when it comes to maintenance on a home that's probably in that 20 years or older range, to really budget about 1% of the value of the home for maintenance. If the home is worth, say, $500,000, then I would think that you're probably going to be looking at, $5,000 a month for maintenance. Now, once again, some years might be more. If you need to replace that roof, you might be looking at 10 or 15,000, and of course, that's a lot higher than 1%. But you're not going to need to replace roofs every year. You're not necessarily going to be replacing HVAC every year. That's what you should expect as far as home maintenance. Last thing I would say when it comes to older homes, now, once again, depending upon where in the country you live, this could be different. In Maryland, where I am, I'm telling you, there is a ton of disclosure. There's a mandatory 4-page disclosure document that sellers need to go through and answer questions like, how old is the roof? How old is the HVAC? Is it leaking? Is the basement leaking? Things like that. At the same time, I go right across the bridge to Virginia, literally 25, 30 minutes away to Northern Virginia, and they have next to no disclosure. So, depending upon what part of the country you are, depending upon what the way disclosure laws are, you may get more, you may get less, but there's also nothing wrong with asking a home seller for any maintenance records that they might have and everything before you enter into the contract. You might get it, you may not, but once again, falls into the category of doesn't hurt to ask. Since you've stuck with me this far, as promised, you get a 6th bonus danger, and that is overestimating rental potential. And the first danger is falling into the Airbnb trap. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Airbnb couldn't be a potential great opportunity to gain some rental income. However, what we're seeing is in many jurisdictions in many areas that they're really cracking down on Airbnb in many communities, especially HOAs and condominiums. Before you just rush in thinking this is going to be an awesome Airbnb, you definitely want to check into the local regulations and restrictions to make sure that you can even do that. One other suggestion I would give is to speak to local property managers who can give you a good feel for the rental market. Is it declining? Is it on its way up? What is the inventory like? What can you realistically expect to rent the property for? Just to make sure, once again, that your expectations are in line with reality. I would also say that your trusted real estate agent should put together a market evaluation based on rental comps. Just like they did on the sales prices in the community, they can do something similar when it comes to the rentals, just to get a sense as to, okay, where are the values? How long are these properties on the market for? What were the properties like in comparison to the one that you're looking at? Once again, just to manage expectations and make sure that your expectations are in line with the market that you're currently in. The last tip I will give you is never rely on rental income to cover your full mortgage. So rental income should always be a bonus, not a necessity. So there you have it. Buying a home in 2025 doesn't need to be a risky move, but it is a move that needs and requires careful planning. Knowing these dangers in advance can save you thousands and help you make a smarter move. And lastly, if you're feeling unsure about any of these steps, or maybe you have other questions when it comes to buying or selling real estate, I would love the opportunity to talk to you one-on-one. If you'd like to make a one-on-one video conference with me and scan that QR code on the screen or click the Calendly link in the description box below. Thanks once again for checking out my latest video. See you next week.